Hello, it's Trish Brennan. I want to just make a short video this evening about a subject that's been on my mind for a while. It's been a fairly intense few weeks for me personally, with quite a bit of processing going on that has needed to be done. And a subject came up last week in a thread on Facebook that in a group I'm involved with, where we were talking about holding space. And I was going to blog about this because I love to write, and I find my creative juices really get flowing when I have a particular subject that really resonates with me. But I thought I just want to share some thoughts around it. That phrase "holding space" has become is quite common language, particularly among women of my generation, as we move into a more expressed phase of life, where in previous years we maybe didn't express quite so much. I've made a video about this myself today, actually, about sharing my truth and what has made me hold back to a degree in acknowledging who I am and what's happened in my life and how I've experienced things. And this holding space phrase is kind of it's like a catch-all for being somewhere where you can be heard and held and understood and acknowledged and not judged and not fixed. There's a really funny video about men's and women's brains by a chap called Mark Gungor. He's a pastor, and he talks about the difference between men and women and how men love to have to fix things. They can do that, it's in their psyche to fix stuff. It makes sense to them. But women like to talk and not have anyone jump in to fix. We like to kind of talk as a way of unraveling what's going on in our own minds and unraveling our emotions, which are more of the heart, of course. So we can kind of answer our own questions, really. And the great thing about women's groups, and certainly one I'm in called the Silver Tent, which is for women of age 50 plus, is it's a great space for this holding space for one another. And there's loads of posts in there, often every day, really, from members of the group who are going through some stuff and don't need fixing, just need to be heard and held and allowed the space to express whatever's going on inside. But the thread that I'm referring to had mentioned about this holding space, and it brought to mind an experience I've been having of late at this stage in my life. For the last few weeks, I've had to kind of pull up the drawbridge a little bit to do some processing of my own, which is kind of relative to, or I've come to realise at least, it's relative to where I'm at in my career and where I go from here, getting the foundations a bit stronger in terms of dealing with some stuff I've needed to deal with. Internal stuff, I mean. And what it's brought up for me is the feeling of, can we hold space for ourselves to heal and to process in this now world that we live in. And of course it gets ever faster because of social media and IT and the technology changes that are happening like lightning these days. There's this feeling of rush about everything, and that holding space for ourselves is like an honouring of our own process. And it's been such a revelation to me to be able to take that time away from things I was doing before to work through some things that were bubbling up for me. At the time that this began, I wasn't even really conscious of what was bubbling up for me. It was kind of an external issue that made me look at the internal stuff that was going on. Okay, what's the reason for this? What's it telling me? And there's been a few close friends around to kind of support through that process, but it's been very much a case of battening down the hatches a little bit and pulling up the drawbridge and giving myself time and show myself a kindness and a patience that I'm not usually terribly good at. I'm great with other people for that, but for myself, I tend to be really impatient, and a bit hard on myself. You should have this sorted by now. You know all this stuff. Why are you struggling? Why are you not able to deal with this and sort it out? So I want to share that thought really for what it's worth for anybody else, about giving yourself space to work through stuff that might be a bit sticky and difficult. And you might not be ready yet to talk to somebody else about these things because it still doesn't really make sense to you. So I think this holding space for ourselves is a really valid and important thing we should learn to do, just out of that place of honour for our own process, and then be ready. There are usually good friends around you, a number of good friends around you can turn to if you stuck. But to be able to honour your own process is such a valuable thing. And in terms of self-esteem, when we can do that for ourselves, it's a real confidence builder to know, you know what, this has been hard, but I've come through it and I feel better about myself. I've got more confidence. I feel much more stable in my own emotions and the way, what underpins my life. I feel I've got more of a handle on it now. And the danger, of course, is that when we don't make that space, we can kind of be like a ping pong ball in one of those machines. I can't remember, ping pong machine. I can't remember what they're called now. The American things, pinball machines. The metal ball thing that's kind of being boinged around all over the place. Life can be like that, if we don't give ourselves that space to zone out a little bit and look after our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own feelings, and just take a few deep breaths over however long it takes. No rush, only until we're ready to come back to the table and say, I'm all right, thank you for being there. I feel much better now. So that's my tip for this evening is, for anybody that's feeling uncomfortable with this idea of shutting the world out a little bit. It's easy for me, I have to acknowledge that, in my current lifestyle. I don't have to really worry too much about anybody else. I'm not sharing a house with anybody else at this moment in time. But for anybody that even, does live on their own, it can be tough to take time out for ourselves. But it can be even harder still when you live with other people and there are all these expectations about you being present for them and doing what they need doing and being the normal you. So it's really important, and I just wanted to share that for anybody that's struggling with it a little bit, that to take that time out to hold space for yourself and to honour who you are and to honour your own process and your own healing, because in that space, that's where your healing is going to come. So thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now.